Why do executives screw up? What a good question. It's true. If you look at the biggest companies in the world, and research backs this up, by the way, chief executives last 7, 8, 9 years. It's that kind of ballpark. And you think, why do these people get the sack? These are highly intelligent people. These are people who have aspired to those positions through hard work, through intellect, through management training, through a whole range of things. These are people who, if they came on many courses that I run, would say the right things, would reach the same conclusions, and you feel, well, how come they lost their jobs? How come they got fired? And a lot of research is coming out on this, and I think a couple of points we've learned. The twin dangers of over optimism and overconfidence are bettered by the fact that you may have a passive board, a passive management team, where nobody has the temerity or the courage to say, "Sir, sorry, Emperor, you aren't wearing any clothes. Thought someone ought to tell you." They don't get questioned, they don't get queried and challenged sufficiently. And often executives are to blame for this because they surround themselves with friends or associates they've worked with before and people they trust. And you could understand why they would do that. But at the same time, you do need to foment and create a culture where people can challenge, can critique, and query. Billy Connolly, the comedian, articulates it in his own unique way when he says, "Her Majesty the Queen of England seems to think that England smells of paint." Because you can guess what happens every time she goes on a state visit. The chances are the day before, the workmen were out padding it up, beautifying it. So, in his own kind of interpretation, England smells of paint. Because then executives see what they want to see, or they see what people want them to see, and that's not healthy. Other things we learn is what I call the worst case scenario. And this is not just for senior executives, this is an organization wide malaise. When we consider the worst case scenario, even then we're far too optimistic. Because the worst case scenario, the real worst case scenario, is a bad place, and we don't want to go there. So we rationalize perhaps a plateau that we're all comfortable with, instead of saying, well, hang on, let's really examine doomsday here. And some advice we give to our clients is, from time to time, when you have your away days and your discussions and your workshop, have that as an overall theme. We will only discuss bad news today. People will amaze you with what they will come up with. But again, that discussion needs to happen. Otherwise, we get too comfortable. Executives rely on what has worked for them before. I've seen this problem before. That's the diagnosis which I use. I will use it again. No guarantee. Every challenge is different. Every problem is different. Just because something has worked historically doesn't mean it is likely to work again. Executives not only need to learn, because learning never stops, but they also need to learn to unlearn. Tools, techniques, practices which may have served us well a decade ago, 2 decades ago, don't apply anymore, or certainly they apply less well. And management theory is littered with models that have lost their sort of pizzazz, that have lost their efficiency simply because times have moved on. I think many people have children, and the most futile thing you can tell a child of 7 or 8 is, as a preface to a reprimand or a lecture, "In my day, when I was your age, we did this." How on earth can you expect a 7-year-old to connect with what your childhood was? It doesn't work. And it's the same in business. The way it was before may not naturally transport and work pretty well. And we have to be clear about that. Questions you need to ask yourself as executives: am I hearing bad news? If not, why not? Even the most superbly well-run organizations and even the most successful organizations have issues, problems of sorts. Why aren't I hearing bad news? Why is that being sort of kept from me and kept away from me? We need to understand that. We need to avoid what I describe as executive incest. The same 10 people talking to the same 10 people to the point where they could finish each other's sentences. And the debate becomes sterile. Discussions on strategy and direction of the organization becomes driven by one or a few people. And that's not healthy for anybody, for the organizations, and for the executives. And I think that's kind of important. And I think some of the discussions we have when we do one-to-one coaching with executives is, how do you spend your time? And this is beyond time management. We've done that. How do you spend your time thinking, planning for your successor? How do you learn? What do you read? These are important questions. We often see, and there are many theories and books written on this, we often see executives getting derailed. And by that I mean they crowd their agenda with a plethora of technical items because that's their background. This is the finance director saying, well, I can't lose touch with accounting standards because that's me, that's my profession. Or the lawyer saying, I can't really lose touch with the law and some of the latest sort of rulings. But when you become managing director or managing partner of a law firm, for example, you have to let those things go, because you will end up doing your organization and yourself a disservice. There are now other people who will perform the technical functions. You need to move on. So I think how you spend your time is a good first start to avoiding derailment and ultimately avoiding being shown the departure gate, which would be tragic given the past success.